Here, every scene is a short journey into moments of small misunderstandings, funny coincidences, and situations where you're not sure whether to laugh or hide your face in your hands. The characters, both the two-legged and the four-legged ones, seem to have a natural talent for stumbling into the most unpredictable predicaments. What turns these simple moments into little comedies of daily life? You're about to find out. Honey, stay here. It was late afternoon and the park was full of life. The sun streamed through the leaves and the air smelled of freshly cut grass. Emily was walking with her beloved Labrador Buddy, energetic but usually obedient. Suddenly, Buddy froze, staring into the distance. Emily followed his gaze and saw Paul, a neighbor from the building next door, whom the dog adored. Before she could react, Buddy shot forward like a rocket. "Honey, stay here!" she shouted loudly, trying to stop him. Instantly, the park's peaceful hum was interrupted. An elderly woman on a bench raised her eyebrows. A couple holding hands turned around, and a tall, well-dressed man standing by the pond suddenly stopped in his tracks. "Excuse me, were you talking to me?" he asked, looking slightly puzzled. Emily glanced at him in confusion, still running after her dog, who was already joyfully jumping all over Paul. Only then did she realize what had happened. When she called honey to her dog, the man beside her thought she was speaking to him. Just a sausage. It was a warm summer afternoon. Emma was coming back from a short walk with her German Shepherd, Max. The dog was strolling calmly, absorbed in sniffing every blade of grass. Suddenly, from around the corner appeared Mrs. Collins, the neighbor from the third floor. In one hand, she carried a grocery bag. In the other, she fanned herself with a folded newspaper. "Good afternoon, Emma," she greeted warmly. Emma stopped to exchange a few pleasantries. They chatted about the weather and the noisy renovation in the building, when Max suddenly lifted his head, sniffed the air, and his demeanor completely changed. In a split second, the calm companion turned into a determined hunter. Before Emma could react, Max lunged toward Mrs. Collins, grabbing her grocery bag in his mouth. "Max, drop it!" Emma called, tugging at the leash. Mrs. Collins spun in place, holding onto the bag's handles while Max pulled the opposite way with the determination of a sled dog. Passers-by began to watch, and one man muttered to his friend, "Look, they're having a tug-of-war over groceries." Suddenly, the bag burst open, and a long sausage flew through the air, landing perfectly at Max's paws. Without a moment's hesitation, he grabbed it and proudly trotted a few steps away, as if he had just won a championship prize. Mrs. Collins, with an amused sigh, looked at Emma and said, "Don't worry, dear. I bought two." Cake, perfectly served. It was a sunny Sunday afternoon, and the park was filled with the scent of fresh grass and strawberries being sold by the entrance. Lily was walking her beagle, Rusty, who was famous for one thing, a nose that always led him straight into trouble. Rusty wandered from one interesting smell to another, when suddenly his ears perked up and his tail started wagging like a helicopter. Lily looked ahead and saw a group of friends having a picnic, a checkered blanket, sandwiches, fruit, and right in the middle, a big homemade cake with cream. "Rusty, no!" she called out, but it was already too late. The dog bolted forward, leaving Lily holding an empty, bouncing leash and gasping in disbelief. By the time she reached them, Rusty had already licked two sandwiches and then very deliberately sat down right on top of the cake, as if it were a throne made exclusively for him. For a split second, everyone froze. Then laughter erupted. One of the guys grinned and said, "I think he just found the best seat in the park." Blushing, Lily began apologizing and offering to replace the food, but the girl in the sun hat waved it off. "No worries. Looks like he enjoys cake just as much as we do." Rusty walked away proud of himself with frosting on his nose and the absolute certainty that this had been the perfect day. Or calm? Well, almost. The waiting room at the vet's was unusually busy that day. In one corner, a woman sat with a cat in a carrier. Nearby, an elderly man was stroking his spaniel, and in the middle of the room, a little girl played with a balloon. Mark walked in confidently, leading his German Shepherd Rex on a leash. "He's really well behaved and calm," Mark said with a proud smile to the receptionist as he waited to check in. Rex sat neatly by his side, gazing up at him with loyal eyes, the picture of obedience. And then, something caught the dog's attention. In the far corner, next to a small table of brochures, stood a bright pink plastic flamingo, clearly placed there as a quirky decoration. Rex narrowed his eyes. His ears twitched. His tail went stiff. And then, without warning, woof, woof, woof! He lunged forward, barking with all the intensity of a guard dog who just spotted the world's greatest threat. The cat hissed inside its carrier. The little girl squealed, and her balloon floated up to the ceiling. "Rex, quiet!" Mark called, his face turning bright red. The receptionist tried to hide a smile. "Well, at least we know he has a keen sense of security," she said, nodding toward the plastic bird. Mark sighed. "He really is calm. He just doesn't like pink." The whole waiting room burst into laughter, while Rex kept casting serious glances at the flamingo, still making sure that strange pink intruder wouldn't cause any trouble. 5. The water bottle heist. It was a crisp morning, perfect for jogging. Tom was running at an even pace along the park path, holding a water bottle in one hand. Beside him trotted his border collie, Buddy, matching every step with ease. For the first few minutes, everything was perfect. Birds were singing, a cool breeze brushed his face, and Tom felt like he'd found his rhythm. And then, Buddy noticed the bottle. First, a quick glance, then another. In his eyes, Tom saw that familiar sparkle. "That's a new toy." Without warning, Buddy lunged sideways, snapping at the bottle. Tom wobbled, trying to keep both his balance and his grip, but his foot caught on an uneven patch of pavement. The next few seconds felt like slow motion. Tom flailing his arms, Buddy pulling in the opposite direction, and right ahead, a group of Nordic walkers coming down the path. Tom tumbled onto the soft grass beside the trail, while Buddy proudly bounded away with the bottle clenched in his mouth, wagging his tail like crazy. "Looks like someone was racing for first place." One of the older men chuckled, offering Tom a hand up. Brushing grass off himself, Tom sighed. "Not me, him," he said, nodding toward Buddy, who was now lying down, guarding the bottle like it was the most precious treasure in the world. The walkers laughed, and Tom silently promised himself that next time, the bottle was staying in the backpack. 6. A whole new plan. It was a lively Saturday afternoon at the neighborhood dog park. Golden retrievers chased balls, little terriers zoomed in circles, and owners chatted while sipping coffee from paper cups. Anna walked in with her mixed-breed dog, Molly, a clever-eyed troublemaker always full of surprises. Anna hoped that this time Molly would join the other dogs and play, but Molly had a completely different plan. After a quick sniff around, she wandered off to the side and began digging furiously. Nothing unusual about that, except the spot she chose was right next to a bench where an elegantly dressed woman sat, wearing a beige coat and pristine light-colored shoes. Molly dug with the determination of an archaeologist unearthing a lost treasure. Clumps of dirt began flying, straight onto the woman's shoes and the hem of her coat as she calmly read a newspaper. "Molly, stop!" Anna hissed, hurrying over. But Molly only dug faster, convinced there was something vitally important under the ground. Finally, the woman felt the tiny impacts of dirt and looked down. Her perfect beige coat was sprinkled with little gray spots of soil. She glanced up at Anna. Her eyes showed as much surprise as amusement. "I see your dog is training for the digging Olympics," she said with a smile, brushing dirt from her knees. Anna flushed red, stumbling over apologies. "Maybe she's found gold," the woman added, nodding toward the hole. "And Molly?" She sat proudly over her discovery. A dry stick that looked completely ordinary, but in her eyes, it was worth every bit of the chaos she'd caused. Love at first lick. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon. Sophie had met up with a few friends in the city to sit together at an outdoor cafe. Beside the table, her golden retriever, Max, lay quietly, the picture of canine calm. The conversation flowed easily until Max suddenly lifted his head. His gaze locked onto a man walking past. His ears perked up, his tail twitched, and then he got up, took 2 steps forward, and sat right in front of the stranger as if he were royalty. The man stopped, puzzled. Hello?" he said, glancing uncertainly at Sophie. Before anyone could react, Max placed a paw gently on the man's knee and began licking his hands with absolute devotion, as though he'd just found the love of his life in the middle of the city. Sophie's friends burst into laughter. Passers-by slowed down to watch, and Sophie herself froze for a moment, torn between apologizing and laughing along. I think he's mistaken you for someone else," she muttered, embarrassed. The stranger grinned. "Or maybe someone finally appreciates me the way I deserve." Laughter erupted even louder. Max, pleased with all the attention, stayed close for a moment longer before happily trotting back to his spot by the table, tail wagging. Sophie sighed with a smile. It seemed her dog had just arranged a very unusual new acquaintance. Rainy walk mishap. It was a gloomy, rainy afternoon. Julia was walking her spirited terrier Chip through the neighborhood. She held a large umbrella in one hand and the leash in the other, determined to keep both herself and Chip dry from the unexpected downpour. The rain was steady and puddles dotted the sidewalk, but Julia kept a close eye on Chip, hoping he wouldn't make a mess. Suddenly, Chip's ears perked up. Without warning, he pounced with pure joy into the biggest puddle around, a muddy, water-filled crater that splashed water everywhere. A startled passerby dressed in a crisp white shirt was just a few steps away and immediately got drenched as water flew off Chip in a powerful arc. The man's eyes widened in shock and dismay as his pristine shirt was soaked in an instant. Julia gasped, mortified, as she nearly dropped the umbrella. Chip, however, looked proud and utterly pleased with himself, shaking off the muddy droplets with a triumphant wag of his tail. Trying to salvage the situation, Julia rushed over with an apologetic smile and a handful of napkins, while the passerby could only laugh at the unexpected shower. As they parted ways, Julia muttered, "Well, at least he's embracing the rain, just not very politely." Chip trotted happily beside her, completely unaware of the small chaos he had just caused, ready to find the next adventure, rain or shine. 9. Bath time chaos. It was meant to be a quiet evening at home. Emma had decided to give her husky Luna a bath after their last rainy walk ended in muddy puddles. The bathroom smelled of fresh shampoo, and Luna sat in the tub looking slightly resigned but obedient. Emma poured warm water over her, lathered her thick fur, and finally said, "Stay in the bath. I'm just going to grab the towel." That was a mistake. The moment Emma stepped out, she heard a splash and a thud. Luna had leapt out of the tub and landed on the tiles before launching herself into a wild sprint around the apartment. Emma dashed after her, but Luna had already stormed into the living room, where 3 of Emma's guests were sitting on the couch, sipping tea. Before anyone could react, the soaking wet husky enthusiastically rubbed herself against their legs, leaving trails of water and foam on trousers and skirts. One guest, dripping and laughing, said, "I didn't know tonight's dinner came with a water show." Blushing bright red, Emma finally returned with the towel, while Luna, proud of her performance, sat right in the middle of the living room, panting happily as everyone burst into laughter. "No dogs allowed, not for me." It was a busy Saturday afternoon in the city center. Laura had gone out shopping with her energetic dachshund, Jack. The sun was shining, people bustled along the streets, and in her hand Laura held a neatly written shopping list. When she reached the local grocery store, a large sign on the door caught her eye. "No dogs allowed." "Stay here, Jack, I'll be right back," she said, clipping his leash to the bike rack outside. Jack looked up at her with big brown eyes, and it was clear he already had a different plan in mind. Laura walked inside, grabbed a basket, and had barely made it past the first aisle when she heard the familiar sound of tiny claws on the floor. She turned, and there was Jack, trotting happily down the aisle as if he owned the place. "Please remove your dog from the store," called the security guard, striding toward her. Laura hurried after the dachshund, who had already made his way to the deli section and was sitting in front of the meat counter, tail wagging furiously. "Jack, come here right now," she shouted. At that moment, the security guard also turned around. "Yes?" he said, looking puzzled. That's when Laura realized the guard's name tag also said Jack. A couple of nearby shoppers burst out laughing. "Oh, I meant the dog," Laura explained quickly, scooping the dachshund up in her arms. The guard chuckled. "Well, at least now I know why you were calling me over so urgently." Jack the dog stared innocently, tail still wagging, and Laura was pretty sure he considered this little mix-up the best victory of his day. If you enjoyed these funny and heartwarming tales of everyday adventures with our four-legged friends, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. There's a whole collection of stories waiting for you, full of surprises, laughter, and those charming moments only dogs can bring. Click complete the series and join us on this joyful journey, where every day with a dog is anything but ordinary. Stay tuned and let the fun continue.